The second part that, again, we need them to bear in mind that the more we move in terms of the numbers, we are basically then shrinking the ability to extend the agreement. And the reason why the extension is important is because there are more than 60% of the employees that are not covered by any trade union in the industry. And in terms of the requirements for extension, we need them to have a majority of the employees in the industry to ascertain and achieve the extension so that the minister can then exercise his or her discretion for the extension. Now, we are saying it's end of the road because if we don't do that, it then means we then continue creating a wrong expectation that we're going to move. There's no move in any form of shape. Rather than moving upwards, we might then have a situation where our member association and member companies, they'll be saying the backdatement and other aspects will be effective from the date when we reach an agreement going forward. Those are the implications or the consequence of the non-acceptance of what we have now on the table. And then I think it then gives you an indication that this end of the road, that's it. We don't have further negotiations on these areas. The second point that I guess...
So in short, what you are saying is you have taken a decision that SEIFSA to break this one.
No, it's not about breaking the strike. I mean, one of the things that we're not willing even to talk about, but because you are raising it, there is a bad faith coming from NINSA point of view. Bad faith in the sense that during the debate and discussion, they basically said, would we be keen to look at a 6% number so that both sides can then basically for unmandated positions, if we reach those numbers, we can then go back and recommend the settlement. We have done that from our side. And now they cannot then shift the goalpost. That's where the bad faith negotiations come to the fore. And hence I'm saying this end of the road, that's it. We're not going to move further in terms of any offer. Whether that will, in your thinking, then prolong the strike, the answer is no, because companies on the ground, effective from next week, Monday, we have plans that we'll be sharing with our members in terms of the road ahead. Some of those issues will then be offering workers increase that they accept, then they are back to work, they return to work. Because that's part of our plan to say we will be advocating for their return to work from Monday on the acceptance of the offer because the negotiations is done and dusted. You can call that, that's a normal thing in collective bargaining. If for the end of the road, those who accept, they accept and they move on. Those who they are not keen and willing to accept, they remain out of the tent because we have businesses to run, we have other things and to look at. The second point that the colleague have raised in terms of job losses. Before even the strike, I mean, the strike, the job losses influenced by a number of things. Companies that they lose the market share, they cannot compete with other companies in specific sectors or markets, whether locally or globally. And once they lose the market share, they then force them to restructure and then relook at certain things locally and internationally. Thirdly, in an event where there is no demand, for example, in a normal course of economy, when the economy is booming, you see the cranes. That shows that there is a construction. Now, even if you were to peep through the window, there are no construction taking place, then tells you that the economy is basically not performing. The demand side of the economy, there is no demand, and therefore it then brings us back to the board to say, how then do we deal with an economy that is not performing? And when the economy is not performing, companies that are looking at reducing their headcounts, looking at their costs, looking at the restructuring, looking at the better ways of doing things. And I'm saying, before the negotiations, number of companies basically retrenched over and above the current pandemic global because we've lost market in various areas. And equally so, even now, the little that companies had because they're not performing, they're not delivering, they're not supplying anyone, they're not operating. There will be further retrenchments that will take place. Some they might even close as a result of losing the market share. So those are the broader implications in terms of job losses. And I think the point that also we are then raising in terms of the food inflation, when you look at the increase in any form of shape, you then look at the performance of the sector, the performance of the companies, the affordability comes to the fore. And historically, when you then look at a wage increase, you then look at the inflation. To say the inflation, the CPI is X. If let's say it's 4.4, then it will be that number plus an improvement factor. That's the historical background of awarding an increase in this industry. Again, if you then look at the CPI, when we started in April, it was less than 5%. And as part of the historical way of awarding an increase, you then look at the offer now at the table is 5.49 on average, is above the CPI. So that's the context in which increases are awarded in this industry.
I just want to make the point that collective bargaining doesn't take place in a vacuum. You know, we are part of an industry that is part of the economy, that is part of the country. The country is not shooting out the lights when it comes to economic performance. The economy has been struggling. I mean, the pandemic has ravaged our industry and our economy. I think we all agree on that. But even prior to the pandemic, you know, we were in recession. We had been downgraded to junk status by some of the more important agencies internationally. We were already on a downward spiral. Our unemployment rate in this country is anything from 44% and above. You know, this is a sector where every single job probably supports between 8 and 10 people, if not more. This is a sector that 30 years ago used to employ almost 500,000 factory workers. We are down to less than half of that. So I understand that unions would want an 8 or 9 or 10% increase. Our members would like an 8, 9 or 10% return on their investment. Neither side is getting that. And what I'm saying to you is that yes, we can look at elements of the CPI basket, like transport, like petrol, like school fees. And yes, those numbers are probably above the 5.49% that we are granting on average, 6% at the bottom for general laborers and 5% for artisans. But in reality, those components of the basket don't make up the overall component of CPI. And we have to look at an indicator that is acceptable to both sides. And CPI over the years is what we've looked at as an indicator. But at the end of the day, whether we look at CPI or any other indicator, it's what the industry can do. So you asked me the question, you know, what is the labor input cost on a company's overall cost structure? Well, it depends on the nature of the company. There are 8,000 companies in this industry, from everyone who makes DB boards to massive foundries that employ hundreds of people, labor-intensive operations to capital-intensive operations. So if you go to a foundry, you will find that the labor input cost into a foundry that is very labor-intensive will be very high. If you go to a company that makes, you know, electrical switchboards, etc., the labor input cost may be slightly lower. So it's horses for courses. This is not a uniform industry, and it's spread around the country. We have companies in Eastern Cape, in East London, in Cape Town, Durban, Gauteng, and right across the country. We are trying to negotiate a moral set of terms and conditions of employment for everyone, and everyone has a reason why they need to be differentiated. To give you an example, I've given you a copy of our main agreement. There isn't only one wage table in that agreement. There are 7. There are 7. So, for example, companies who 20 years ago decided to implement the 5-grade agreement because they saw the benefits of multi-skilling, multitasking, growing the employees to move up the career chain and to attain the status of an artisan, the increase for those employees is 5% across the board. The increase for a general labourer at the bottom is 6%. For an artisan, it's 5%. So we are not the auto industry with 5 or 6 companies. We are not the tyre industries with 6 or even less. How many tyre companies are left? Maybe 3 or 4 tyre companies. This is a sector that is made up of 8,500 companies at most, employing 220,000 blue-collar workers. And we are one negotiating partner at the table with a deal that is significantly better than any other employer organisation that has been at those negotiations since day one. I put it to you with the greatest of respect that NUMSA's fight is not with SEIFSA. And I put it to you again so we don't misunderstand one another. NUMSA's fight is not with SEIFSA. And if you had listened to Urban Jim's press conference yesterday, you will know who his fight is with. It's not with us, but our members, because they make up the majority of members in this industry, are feeling the kickback from that dissatisfaction that NUMSA has with other employer organizations. Our desire, our aim, and our intention is to end the strike quickly, because it's hurting them and it's hurting us. Yeah, please.
Following on from the colleague.
Yes. Yes.
So, come Monday, is there a chance that employees decide to continue striking or be served with additional benefits?
Look, we recognize the constitutional right to strike. We are a responsible employer organisation. We are a fair employer federation. Our members, represented by the 18 employer organisations, respect the rule of law. Employees have a right to strike. What we take issue with is what is happening during the strike. That's a separate discussion that we will deal with separately. Workers who wish to withdraw their labour, any worker in this industry who wishes to participate in the strike is at liberty to do so. We recognise our constitution of this country. We recognise the difficult legacy that we've come from. And as a matter of interest, the Labour Relations Act was the first act that was enacted by our democratically elected parliament way back in 1995. So we have no qualm with the right to strike. We have a problem with what's happening during the strike. Anyone who wants to continue striking post-Monday, that's their right to do so, on the basis that is with no work, no pay. And if you find them guilty of misconduct, there will be repercussions. We want our workers to come back to work yesterday, but we can't force them. We live in a free country. But living in a free country doesn't mean that you don't take responsibility and accountability for your actions. That's a separate discussion.
I'll take 3 questions from online. There is a request that when you answer the question, if you could repeat the question first before answering. So, Sipo Tuli, when is the feedback expected from organized labor in terms of revised, improved offer as articulated? Sydney Lazarus, when last did SEIFSA meet with NUMSA? And Boniswa, what else is SEIFSA doing to ensure that employers and the union are able to find each other during these wage talks?
Okay, so let me deal with the last question first. We are available 24/7, anytime, any place, anywhere to meet with NUMSA to end the strike. The ball is in their court. The last time that we met with NUMSA was last week, Thursday. This week? No, sorry, this week, Thursday. Sorry, my apologies, it's been a rough couple of days. Thursday night we met with NUMSA. We called an urgent mandating meeting of the Assembly of Associations. We put what was put to us to our mandating body, the SEIFSA Council. And what we shared with NUMSA the next day is what I've shared with you this morning. We now wait for them to decide what they do next. If they make the call, we'll meet them this afternoon. If they make the call next week, Monday, we'll meet them on Monday. We have nothing more to add to what is on the table. It's deplorable and regrettable and unacceptable what is happening. But that is the ugly side of centralized collective bargaining. We need to manage it. We need to get through it. Because at the end of the day, all these employees have to come back to our members' companies. And we need to forgive one another, possibly not forget that quickly, but we need to move on. Because we need to build this country. Okay, next.
Masejo Mafata, what is the difference between an increase on minimum rates of pay and an increase on actual rates of pay?
Okay. Let's deal with that first before we get it. So let's deal with that quickly. So let's make sure that we all understand what the offer is to our trade union colleagues. At the bottom, we've spoken at length about a 6% increase on the main agreement scheduled rate. For a general labourer, the increase for a general labourer is 6%. 6% on the scheduled rate equates to a R2.97 increase. In this industry, because of the nature and size of the industry and the number of companies in the industry and the fact that this industry has been around longer than I've been alive, in many companies, some employees will earn 49 Rand 55, some will earn 50 Rand, 52 Rand, 51 Rand. So what we say, in the category of that schedule as a general labourer, your increase will be R2.97. And that principle cuts across the 13 categories of employment. That's why when we say that the increase will be awarded to our employees on a guaranteed personal rand and cent basis, that's what we're talking about. The issue between NUMSA and SEIFSA is not a quantum issue. We're not disagreeing with one another because he wants 7% and we at 5 and the middle ground is 6. We're way beyond that conversation. 6% is acceptable to both sides. We are not arguing quantum, we're arguing principle. We are saying 6% on rands and cent, which by the way, I want to stress and re-stress and stress again. We have not sprung this on our trade union colleagues 1 minute past midnight. It has been our position from day one, and negotiations commenced in April. This is a view that has emerged in discussions with NUMSA in particular, maybe possibly supported by the other trade unions, that is preventing sign-off of this agreement. This industry cannot continue something that has been the practice for the last 30 years, to increase employers' wage bills on an actual basis. Because the compounding effect of an increase on an increase based on what employees actually earn on the shop floor does 3 things. It makes companies uncompetitive, it leads to job shedding, and it does nothing for job creation. The 3 ingredients we need to grow this economy and move this industry forward. And I'll end off by saying, even with a 6% increase on 49.55, the entry-level package for a general labourer, ladies and gentlemen, is 12,700 Rand. Show me a sector that is currently engaged and involved in collective bargaining that comes anywhere close to that. Maybe 1 or 2. Maybe the tyre sector, maybe the water sector, but not many others.
But also, you need to acknowledge that if we then issue increase on actuals, the ability to extend the agreement then becomes narrow and narrow and narrow. Because companies and associations that they pay above the industry minimum, they're not going to be part of the extension. And those who, for the past 13 or 12 years, they're not party to the agreements. They continue to be outside the tent, and hence the ability to extend the agreement, it becomes narrow. And it then defeats the intention of concluding an agreement that is then extended to cover everybody in the industry. So those are some of the principal opposition to an increase on actuals this year, because we basically continue to shrink the cake for the extension. But if we then conclude an agreement based on industry minimums, the ability to extend the agreement becomes higher and higher. Because those who are outside, they see a reason in the rationale for them being part of this thing on the basis that we then give them a special dispensation to cover up.
I have a question from Hokecho. If you say that employees who accept the offer can return and those who do not accept can continue, what does that mean for the main agreement? Does it mean the agreements will be plant level ones between employers and employee? Then from Sydney Lazarus, can we speak to our employees directly to come back to work? And then Anton Lessing, the offer table to organize labor is what employees can accept and work, does not mean plant level negotiations due to what has been offered at negotiation level is what is unilaterally implemented. Sydney, of course, based upon what has been tabled.
So let's just take things slowly.
Yeah.
We are in the process of discussing with our employer organizations what we will roll out next week. So the message to our members who are watching this transmission, wait for the next wage negotiation update document, which will be circulated on Monday late afternoon, and we will share it with the media. We have no desire to go back to collective bargaining. That's why we support centralized collective bargaining, and it's why we are principally supportive of extension of collective agreements.
All right, just give me a second.
Can I just make a point while we're waiting? You know, what we are experiencing now is regrettable. I've said that already. But the iron, steel, engineering, and metallurgical industry is not an industry that is prone to strike action when it comes to collective bargaining. In the last 30 years, we've had 6 strikes in this industry. Strikes that we are experiencing now, we've had 6 in 30 years. I can give you the dates and I can give you the duration. But the point I want to make is that SEIFSA has invested heavily in the relationships between ourselves and the industry's trade unions. Principle of which is NIMSA, the biggest trade union in the industry that leads the fight on the improvement of terms and conditions of employment. We respect that. We support that. We have a good relationship with NIMSA. What we're going through now is part of the collective bargaining ritual. But we're not an industry that is at odds with organized labor. We support trade unions, and in fact, we support strong trade unions in the interest of voluntary, centralized collective bargaining. The last strike we had in this industry was in 2014, and it was a terrible experience. I hope that 2021 is not a repeat of that, because the economy today is completely different to the economy. We cannot afford that.
Got a question from OPPA. Our company gave employees a 4.4% increase from 1st of July. Does it mean from Monday we need to adjust to 6% and backdate it to the 1st of July?
Wait for the SEIFSA management brief that will be issued on Monday. It will be wage negotiation management brief magic number 20. Be patient.
When is the next talks with NUMSA and when will feedback then follow? Monday.
There are no scheduled talks with NUMSA. We are at their beck and call should they wish to talk to us. They know all our numbers and they've never refrained or been embarrassed of phoning us. If they want to talk to us, they can do so right now.
If we have failed to secure an extension in the past couple of negotiations, why do you believe it will be successful this time round?
We can't guarantee extension. We are saying that we support the idea of a bargaining council being able to conclude an agreement that becomes extended to non-parties. That's the purpose and core function of a bargaining council. Otherwise, why would we support a bargaining council establishment which is a creature of the Labour Relations Act? Extension is a complex and difficult problem which we with Labour and other employer organizations to see how we can unpack it, unlock it, and make it happen in everyone's interest.
What are we doing about the violence being experienced as part of the strike?
Okay, so I did start off my presentation this morning that that is one characteristic of what we are living through at the moment, that we are completely dissatisfied and unhappy with. We are currently in discussions with the National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure, commonly referred to as NAT joints, which is the coordinating body for all security and law enforcement agencies throughout the country. Whether it's the South African Police Force, the South African National Defence Force, and the various metros. We are talking to them. We are in the process of compiling a plan. We are in the process of identifying hotspots and identifying areas that need special attention. What we want to see as responsible corporate citizens is more feet on the ground, resourced police, visible policing, and action where the law is being broken. We don't want to get anywhere close to what we saw a couple of months ago play out on our TVs when the looting was happening in places like KZN and certain parts of Gauteng. That is something that worries us, keeps us awake at night, and we will roll out a plan as soon as possible to ensure that that doesn't.
Does the increase on the table, i.e. increase based on minimum rate of pay, applicable to the companies that are granted exemption? Example, if I am exempted to pay 70% of minimum wages, what increase do I effect?
You will implement a rand and cent increase on the 70% that you are observing.
Was SEIFSA part of the Section 150 meeting yesterday evening?
No, we weren't, because we think that going through a conciliation process, which we've already been through, would be pointless. We've been through conciliation. In fact, we spent, if I'm not mistaken, between 4 or 5 or 6 sessions under a senior CCMA commissioner that resulted in strike notices being served. We are trying to end the strike. We are not trying to conciliate differences any further.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see any other questions online. Calling out for any more last questions. If there appear to be none, we will close this press conference. Last comments, Lucho?
No, I mean, just we are acutely aware of the pain that our members are feeling and the nervousness that is beginning to permeate throughout the industry. And I call on our members to continue to support your employer organization, to continue to support the negotiating team that the associations have elected. And I want to thank each and every member of the negotiating team who's made themselves available, often in meetings that have gone late into the night, sometimes into the next morning. We are doing everything in our power to do what needs to be done to bring things to a mutually, and I want to underline that word, mutually acceptable outcome. And just a word of thanks to our individual member companies, without whom none of us would be sitting here today, and we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude for supporting us and holding the line. By holding the line, we'll do this, I promise you, as your CEO and with the colleagues around me today, and with support of my president and my board, we understand what is at stake, and we are doing everything to get to the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.